Papua New Guinea is a country in Oceania that comprises the eastern half of the island of New Guinea and offshore islands in Melanesia, a region of the southwestern Pacific Ocean north of Australia. It has a land border with Indonesia to the west and neighbors Australia to the south and the Solomon Islands to the east. Its capital, on its southern coast, is Port Moresby. The country is the world's third largest island country, with an area of 462,840 kilometers square. The nation was split in the 1880s between German New Guinea in the north and the British territory of Papua in the south, the latter of which was ceded to Australia in 1902. All of present-day Papua New Guinea came under Australian control following World War I, with the legally distinct territory of New Guinea being established out of the former German colony as a League of Nations mandate. The nation was the site of fierce fighting during the New Guinea campaign of World War II. Papua New Guinea became an independent Commonwealth realm in 1975 with Elizabeth II as its queen. Since Elizabeth II's death in 2022, Charles III has been the king. There are 840 languages of Papua New Guinea, including English, making it the most linguistically diverse country in the world. It is also one of the most rural countries, with only 13.25% of its population living in urban centers in 2019. Most of its people live in customary communities. Although government estimates reported the country's population to be 11.8 million, it was reported in December 2022 that its population was in fact closer to 17 million. Papua New Guinea is the most populous Pacific island country. The country is believed to be the home of many undocumented species of plants and animals. Papua New Guinea is classified as a developing economy by the International Monetary Fund. Nearly 40% of the population are subsistence farmers, living relatively independently of the cash economy. Their traditional social groupings are explicitly acknowledged by the Papua New Guinea Constitution, which expresses the wish for traditional villages and communities to remain as viable units of Papua New Guinean society and protects their continuing importance to local and national community life. Papua New Guinea has been an observer state in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations since 1976 and has filed its application for full membership status. It is a full member of the Commonwealth of Nations, Pacific Community, Pacific Islands Forum and United Nations. The climate on the island is tropical but varies by region. Maximum temperature in the lowlands is 30 to 32 degrees Celsius and minimum 23 to 24 degrees Celsius. In the highlands above 2,100 meters, colder conditions prevail and night frosts are common there while daytime temperature exceeds 22 degrees Celsius, regardless of the season. Many species of birds and mammals found on New Guinea have close genetic links with corresponding species found in Australia. One notable feature in common for the two landmasses is the existence of several species of marsupial mammals, including some kangaroos and possums, which are not found elsewhere. Papua New Guinea is a mega-diverse country. Many of the other islands within PNG territory, including New Britain, New Ireland, Bougainville, Admiralty Islands, Trobriand Islands, and Louisiade Archipelago, were never linked to New Guinea by land bridges. As a consequence, they have their own flora and fauna. In particular, they lack many of the land mammals and flightless birds that are common to New Guinea and Australia. Australia and New Guinea are portions of ancient supercontinent of Gondwana, which started to break into smaller continents in Cretaceous period, 65 to 130 million years ago. Australia finally broke free from Antarctica about 45 million years ago. All the Australasian lands are home to Antarctic flora, descended from flora of southern Gondwana, including coniferous podocarps, Araucaria pines, and broad-leafed southern beech, not Hophagus. These plant families are still present in Papua New Guinea. New Guinea is part of humid tropics and many Indo-Malayan rainforest plants spread across the narrow straits from Asia, mixing with old Australian and Antarctic floras. New Guinea identified as the world's most floristically diverse island in the world with 13,634 species of vascular plants. 3 new species of mammals discovered in the forests of Papua New Guinea by an Australian-led expedition in early 2010s. Small wallaby, large-eared mouse, and shrew-like marsupial were discovered. The expedition was also successful in capturing photographs and video footage of other rare animals such as Tenkile tree kangaroo and Waimong tree kangaroo. Nearly 1/4 of Papua New Guinea's rainforests damaged or destroyed between 1972 and 2002. Mangrove swamps stretch along the coast and in the inland inhabited by nipa palm, Nipa fruticans, and deeper in the inland the sago palm tree inhabits areas in the valleys of larger rivers. Trees such as oaks, red cedars, pines, and beeches are becoming predominant in the uplands above 3,300 feet. Papua New Guinea is rich in various species of reptiles, indigenous freshwater fish and birds, but it is almost devoid of large mammals. Papua New Guinea is one of the most heterogeneous nations in the world, with 8.95 million inhabitants as of 2020 and hundreds of ethnic groups indigenous to Papua New Guinea. Majority from group known as Papuans, whose ancestors arrived in New Guinea region tens of thousands of years ago. Other indigenous peoples are Austronesians. Their ancestors arrived in the region less than 4,000 years ago. 95.6% of citizens identified themselves as Christian. Located north of Australian mainland, the country's geography is diverse and in places, extremely rugged. A spine of mountains, New Guinea Highlands, runs the length of the island of New Guinea, forming populous highlands region mostly covered with tropical rainforest, and the long Papuan Peninsula bird's tail. Dense rainforests in the lowland and coastal areas, as well as very large wetland areas surrounding Sepik and Fly rivers. This terrain made it difficult for the country to develop transportation infrastructure. Air travel is the most efficient and reliable means of transportation. Highest peak is Mount Wilhelm at 4,509 meters. Papua New Guinea is surrounded by coral reefs which are under close watch in the interests of preservation. Papua New Guinea's largest rivers are in New Guinea and include Sepik, Romu, Markham, Musa, Parari, Kikori, Tarama, Wawoi and Fly. The country is situated on Pacific Ring of Fire at point of collision of several tectonic plates. Geologically, the island of New Guinea is a northern extension of Indo-Australian tectonic plate, forming part of a single land mass which is Australian New Guinea. It is connected to Australian segment by shallow continental shelf across Torres Strait, which in former ages lay exposed as a land bridge, particularly during ice ages when sea levels were lower than present. As the Indo-Australian plate, which includes landmasses of India, Australia and Indian Ocean floor in between, drifts north, it collides with Eurasian plate. The collision of the two plates pushed up Himalayas, Indonesian islands and New Guinea's Central Range. The Central Range is much younger and higher than the mountains of Australia, so high that it is home to rare equatorial glacier. There are several active volcanoes and eruptions are frequent. Earthquakes are common, sometimes accompanied by tsunamis. On the 25th of February, 2018, an earthquake of magnitude 7.5 and depth of 35 kilometers struck the middle of Papua New Guinea. The worst of the damage was centered around Southern Highlands region. Papua New Guinea is one of the few regions close to the equator that experience snowfall, which occurs in the most elevated parts of the mainland. Border between Papua New Guinea and Indonesia confirmed by treaty with Australia before independence in 1974. The land border comprises a segment of 141 degrees east meridian from north coast southwards to where it meets Fly River flowing east, then a short curve of rivers Thalweg to where it meets 141 degrees 1 minute 10 seconds east meridian flowing west, then southwards to the south coast. The 141 degrees east meridian formed the entire eastern boundary of Dutch New Guinea according to 1828 annexation proclamation. By Treaty of The Hague, 1895, Dutch and British agreed to a territorial exchange, bringing the entire left bank of Fly River into British New Guinea and moving southern border east to Terasi Estuary. The maritime boundary with Australia confirmed by treaty in 1978. In Torres Strait, it runs close to the mainland of New Guinea, keeping the adjacent northwestern Torres Strait Islands, Darwin, Boigu and Saibai, under Australian sovereignty. Maritime boundaries with Solomon Islands confirmed by 1989 treaty. Papua New Guinea is famous for its frequent seismic activity on the Ring of Fire. On the 17th of July, 1998, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake struck north of 8 Ape. It triggered a 50-foot-high tsunami which killed over 2,180 people in one of the worst natural disasters in the country. In September 2002, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake struck off the coast of Wewak, Sandaun Province, killing 6 people. From March to April 2018, a chain of earthquakes hit Haila province, causing widespread landslides and 200 deaths. Various nations from Oceania and Southeast Asia immediately sent aid to the country. Another severe earthquake occurred on the 11th of September, 2022, killing 7 people and causing damaging shaking in some of the country's largest cities such as Leh and Madang. It was also felt in the capital Port Moresby. On the 24th of May, 2024, a landslide hit Kaukalam village in Enga province, about 600 kilometers northwest of the capital, Port Moresby, at 3 a.m. local time. The landslide buried more than 2,000 people alive, caused major destruction to buildings, food gardens, and impact on the economic lifeline of the country. The casualty figure surpasses 2006 Southern Leyte mudslide tragedy, where a total of 1,126 people lost their lives as the debris flow from a landslide followed 10 days of heavy rain. Archaeological evidence indicates that humans first arrived in Papua New Guinea around 42,000 to 45,000 years ago. They were descendants of migrants out of Africa, in one of the early waves of human migration. 2016 study at University of Cambridge by Christopher Klein et al. Suggests that it was about 50,000 years ago that these peoples reached Sol, paleocontinent consisting of present-day Australia and New Guinea. The sea levels rose and isolated New Guinea about 10,000 years ago, but Aboriginal Australians and Papuans diverged from each other genetically earlier, about 37,000 years BP. Evolutionary geneticist Svante Pääbo found that people of New Guinea share 4% to 7% of their genome with Denisovans, indicating that the ancestors of Papuans interbred in Asia with these archaic hominins. Agriculture independently developed in New Guinea highlands around 1700 BC, making it one of the few areas in the world where people independently domesticated plants. A major migration of Austronesian-speaking peoples to coastal regions of New Guinea took place around 500 BC. This has been correlated with the introduction of pottery, pigs, and certain fishing techniques. In 18th century, traders brought the sweet potato to New Guinea, where it was adopted and became a staple food. Portuguese traders obtained it from South America and introduced to Moluccas. The far higher crop yields from sweet potato radically transformed traditional agriculture and societies. Sweet potato largely supplanted the previous staple, taro, and resulted in significant increase in population in the highlands. Although by late 20th century headhunting and cannibalism had been practically eradicated, in the past they were practiced in many parts of the country as part of rituals related to warfare and taking in enemy spirits or powers. In 1901, Goaribari Island in the Gulf of Papua, missionary Harry Dauncey found 10,000 skulls in the island's longhouses, a demonstration of past practices. According to Mariana Torgovnik, writing in 1991, the most fully documented instances of cannibalism as a social institution come from New Guinea, where headhunting and ritual cannibalism survived, in certain isolated areas, into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and still leave traces within certain social groups. Little was known in Europe about the island until 19th century. Although Portuguese and Spanish explorers such as Dom Jorge de Menezes and Inigo Ortiz de Retes had encountered as early as 16th century. Traders from Southeast Asia visited New Guinea beginning 5,000 years ago to collect bird of paradise plumes. Christianity was introduced to New Guinea on the 15th of September, 1847, when a group of Marist missionaries came to Woodlark Island. They established their first mission on Umboy Island. Following that year, they were forced to withdraw their mission endeavor. 5 years later, on the 8th of October, 1852, Pontifical Institute for Foreign Missions, a pontifical institute re-established the mission on Woodlark Island, encountering sickness and resistance from local people. The country's dual name results from its complex administrative history before independence. Beginning in 1884, the region was split between two colonial powers. Germany ruled the northern half of the country for several decades as a colony named German New Guinea, while the southern part of the country became a British protectorate. In 1888, British Protectorate, as well as some adjacent islands, were annexed by Britain as British New Guinea. In 1902, Papua effectively transferred to the authority of New British Dominion of Australia. With the passage of Papua Act 1905, the area officially renamed Territory of Papua, and Australian administration became formal in 1906. Following outbreak of World War I in 1914, Australian forces captured German New Guinea and occupied it throughout the war. After Germany and the Central Powers were defeated in the war, League of Nations authorized Australia to administer this area as a League of Nations mandate territory, which became Territory of New Guinea. In contrast to establishing an Australian mandate in former German New Guinea, the League of Nations determined that Papua was an external territory of Australian Commonwealth. As a matter of law, it remained British possession. The difference in legal status meant that until 1949, Papua, former British Protectorate Territory of Papua, and New Guinea, former German territory German New Guinea, had entirely separate administrations, both controlled by Australia. These conditions contributed to the complexity of organizing the country's post-independence legal system. The Highland Valleys were first explored by Australians in the 1930s and were found to be inhabited by over 1 million people. During World War II, New Guinea Campaign, 1942 to 1945, was one of the major military campaigns and conflicts between Japan and the Allies. Approximately 216,000 Japanese, Australian and US servicemen died. After World War II and the victory of the Allies, the two territories combined into Territory of Papua and New Guinea. This was later referred to as Papua New Guinea. After World War II, Australia administered the two newly combined territories of Papua and New Guinea. By 1951, a 28-member Legislative Council was instituted, although this was largely dominated by Australian administrative members, with only 3 seats allocated to Papua New Guineans. Sir Donald Cleland, an Australian soldier, became the first administrator of this new council. In 1964, the council was replaced by the 64-member House of Assembly of Papua and New Guinea, which for the first time had a majority of Papua New Guinean members. The Assembly increased to 84 members in 1967 and 100 by 1971. Debate began over Australian administration both in Papua New Guinea and Australia, with Bougainville independence movement pushing for greater autonomy as Australian mining company Rio Tinto's exploitative practices became extremely controversial to the region's indigenous landowners, with demands for compensation. Australian opposition leader Gough Whitlam visited Papua New Guinea in 1970 and 1971, amid further calls for independence by Talai people in Gazelle Peninsula. He called for self-governance for the territory as early as 1972. At 1972 Papua New Guinean general election in July, Michael Somare was elected as the first Papua New Guinean chief minister of the territory. In December, Whitlam was elected as Prime Minister at the 1972 Australian federal election. The Whitlam government then instituted self-governance under the rule of Somare in late 1973. Over the next 2 years, further arguments for independence were forwarded, culminating in the Whitlam government passing the Papua New Guinea Independence Act 1975 in September 1975, citing the 16th of September, 1975 as the date of independence. Whitlam and then Prince Charles attended the independence ceremony, with Somare continuing as the country's first prime minister. A secessionist revolt in 1975–76 on Bougainville Island resulted in an 11th-hour modification of the draft constitution of Papua New Guinea to allow for Bougainville and 18 districts to quasi-federal status as provinces. A renewed uprising on Bougainville started in 1988 and claimed 20,000 lives until resolved in 1997. Bougainville had been the mining region of the country, generating 40% of national budget. The native peoples felt they were bearing the adverse environmental effects of the mining, which contaminated the land, water and air, without gaining a fair share of the profits. The government and rebels negotiated peace agreement that established Bougainville Autonomous District and Province.